Good day, everyone, and welcome to chapter 30, which is all about inductance. So, today we begin with a topic that plays a central role in modern electrical engineering, power systems, and electronics. So, inductance is the one that explains why electric currents don't like to change suddenly, why sparks appear when switches are opened, and why electrical systems can remain stable even under extreme conditions. So, although this may sound complex and the idea of inductance may initially sound abstract, it is deeply connected to our everyday experiences and technologies that we use daily. So, to build intuition, imagine electricity as water that is flowing through pipes. So, a resistor is like a narrow section of the pipe. It simply slows the flow and converts energy into heat. An inductor, however, behaves very differently. It is more like a heavy flywheel that is attached to the pipe. When water starts flowing, the flywheel resists sudden motion. When the water tries to stop, the flywheel keeps it moving. And in the same way, an inductor resists sudden changes in current by temporarily storing energy in a magnetic field. This resistance to change is the heart of inductance. But before we dive deeper, it's important to clearly understand what we aim to learn in this chapter. So we have here our objectives or the goals of this discussion. First, we will study mutual inductance, which occurs when a changing current in one coil induces an EMF in another nearby coil. This phenomenon allows energy to be transferred without direct contact and is the foundation of transformers, wireless charging, like the MagSafe, and power distribution systems. And next, we will explore self-inductance, where a coil resists changes in its own current. So we will also learn how inductors store energy in magnetic fields rather than dissipating it as heat. After that, we will analyze R to L circuits, focusing on how current increases and decreases gradually over time. Finally, we will study LC and LRC circuits where energy oscillates between electric and magnetic forms. Throughout this chapter, we will connect equations to physical meaning and real life applications. Okay, so let's begin with a real world example that you may have encountered regularly. Traffic lights. You stop at a red light late at night with no pedestrians and no visible sensors. Yet somehow the traffic light knows that your car is there. Beneath the road is a loop of wire, a coil that is connected to an electronic circuit. This loop produces a magnetic field as current flows through it. When your car stops above the loop, the metal in the car alters the magnetic field. This change induces a small current and EMF in the circuit, which now signals the traffic system to change the light. This is the inductance in action. Nothing touches your car and no batteries are added, only magnetic fields and changing currents. So this example shows that inductance is not theoretical. It is a practical tool that engineers rely on every day. Now let's consider two coils that are placed close together. When the current in the first coil changes, it produces a changing magnetic field around it. This changing magnetic field passes through the second coil and induces an EMF there. The second coil responds even though it is not directly connected to the first. This interaction is known as mutual inductance. This is represented by the symbol M right here. So the closer the coils and the greater the magnetic fields overlap, the stronger the mutual inductance. A helpful analogy is two tuning forks placed near each other. Strike one fork and the other begins to vibrate. Energy is transferred through invisible waves, just as energy is transferred through magnetic fields between coils. Now, another familiar or known example of mutual inductance is the electric toothbrush. So, inside the charging base is a coil that is connected to alternating current, and inside the toothbrush handle is another coil. When you place the toothbrush on the base, energy flows from the base to the toothbrush without any metal contacts. So the changing current in the base coil creates a changing magnetic field which induces an EMF in the coil inside the toothbrush. So this EMF charges the battery safely and efficiently. Wireless phone chargers work on the exact same principle, like when you charge your phone on the massage chairs in the malls or when you use your MagSafe on your iPhone. So mutual inductance allows energy transfer without exposed electrical connections, improving safety and durability, of course. Now, self-inductance, it occurs when a changing current in a coil induces an EMF in the same coil. So this induced EMF always opposes the change in current. This is a consequence of Lenz's law. In other words, the coil resists changes to its own current. So we have here an analogy that will help clarify this idea. Now, imagine pushing a heavy shopping cart. When it is at rest, it resists starting, of course, obviously. But once it's moving, it resists stopping. A coil behaves the same way with electric current. The faster you try to change the current, the stronger the opposing EMF becomes. So this resistance to change is quantified by inductance, represented by this letter L, and is measured in henries. Lightning produces extremely sudden and powerful current changes. If these changes reached electrical equipment directly, the damage would be catastrophic. Inductors are used in power systems to protect equipment from these dangerous surges. Because inductors resist rapid change in the current, they act like electrical shock absorbers. When a lightning-induced surge occurs, the inductor temporarily stores energy in its magnetic field, smoothing the spike before it can damage sensitive components. So this protective role makes inductors essential in power engineering and infrastructure. So in circuit analysis, inductors behave differently from resistors. The voltage across an inductor depends on how quickly the current changes and not on the current itself. Slow changes produce small voltages, while of course rapid changes produce large voltages. Think of this. Uh, think of driving over a speed bump. At low speed, the bump feels gentle, and at high speed, it feels harsh. Similarly, inductors strongly oppose rapid current changes, but it allows slow changes to pass easily. This explains why switching circuits quickly can produce sparks or voltage spikes. So this is one of the reasons why you do not let your children or anyone that is playing with the switch to turn it on and off quickly or rapidly, or in general do not play with your switches at home. Now, resistors, they behave in a much more straightforward manner. The voltage across a resistor is proportional to the current flowing through it, as described by Ohm's law. This relationship holds whether the current is steady or changing. So the resistor does not remember past behavior. It responds instantly to whatever current flows. So, energy in a resistor is always dissipated as heat. This makes a resistor useful for controlling current, but it is also inefficient for storing energy. When we compare resistors with inductors, we begin to see why circuits containing both components behave so differently over time. The resistor removes energy while the inductor temporarily stores it. So let's now consider an inductor carrying a constant current. Because the current is not changing, the magnetic field around the inductor is also constant or stationary. With no change in magnetic field, no EMF is induced. So as a result, the voltage across the inductor is also zero. So this situation is similar to a car moving at a constant speed on a flat road. There is motion but no acceleration. The inductor remains inactive, responding only when change occurs. So this emphasizes a key idea that inductors react to change, not to steady conditions. Now, when the current in an inductor begins to increase, an important physical process immediately takes place. So, as changes start moving faster through the coil, the magnetic field surrounding the inductor begins to grow in strength. So, this change in the magnetic field is not passive, it actively influences the circuit itself. And according to Faraday's law of induction, any changing magnetic field produces an induced EMF. This induced EMF is a direct consequence of the changing current. And Lenz's law, as you can remember, Lenz's law tells us the direction of this induced EMF. It always acts to oppose the change that created it. In this situation, the change is an increasing current, so the induced EMF points in the opposite direction of the applied voltage. So this opposing EMF reduces the net voltage in the circuit, making it harder for the current to rise quickly. The inductor, therefore, resists sudden increases in current even when connected to a strong power source. So this behavior is why inductors are often described as having electrical inertia. And just as a massive object resists being accelerated, an inductor resists changes in current. So the energy supplied by the battery is not wasted during this process. Instead, it is stored in the growing magnetic field around the inductor. And as a result, the current increases smoothly rather than instantaneously, protecting the circuit from sudden current surges. Now, let us consider what happens when the current through an inductor begins to decrease. As the current drops, the magnetic field surrounding the inductor starts to weaken and collapse. So this changing magnetic field once again induces an EMF, just as Faraday's law predicts. The inductor does not simply allow the current to disappear. Instead, it actively responds to the change. So according to Lenz's law, the induced EMF will oppose the decrease in current. So this means the induced EMF acts as the same direction as the original current, and in effect, the inductor attempts to maintain the flow of charge. And even when the external power source is removed, the inductor briefly behaves like a source of EMF itself. So this is why the current can continue flowing for a short time after a switch is opened. The energy that makes this possible comes from the magnetic field. So as the magnetic field collapses, its stored energy is converted back into electrical energy. So this energy release can be strong enough to produce sparks across switches or gaps, and such sparks are clear evidence of the inductor's resistance to change. They demonstrate that inductors strongly oppose sudden decreases in current. Now, one of the most important ideas in the study of inductance is that inductors store energy. This energy is not stored in the metal wire itself. Instead, it is stored in the magnetic field that surrounds the inductor when current flows. Establishing this magnetic field requires work to be done by the power source, so that work does not vanish, it becomes stored energy. This behavior is fundamentally different from what happens in a resistor. In a resistor, electrical energy is irreversibly converted into thermal energy. Once converted to heat, the energy cannot be recovered for useful electrical work. And in contrast, the energy stored in an inductor can be returned to the circuit. So this makes inductors temporary energy storage devices rather than energy sinks. And because of this property, inductors are essential components in many electrical systems. They are used in power supplies, transformers, and energy conversion devices. Inductors help regulate current and manage energy flow efficiently. So they play a crucial role in circuits where energy must be stored and released smoothly. Understanding magnetic field energy is therefore key to understanding real electrical systems. To understand where the stored energy actually exists, we introduce the concept of magnetic energy density. Energy stored in an inductor is not confined to a single point or component. Instead, it is distributed throughout the space where the magnetic field exists. This means that the energy is spread through the surrounding region and not locked inside the wire. The strength of the magnetic field determines how much energy is stored in a given volume. Magnetic energy density depends on both the magnetic field strength and the properties of the medium. Stronger magnetic fields correspond to a higher energy density, and materials with different magnetic permeabilities affect how energy is distributed. So this shows that the environment around the inductor matters, not just the inductor itself. Space filled with magnetic fields actively participates in energy storage. So this idea here reinforces an important physical principle that fields are real. Electric and magnetic fields are not just mathematical tools. They carry energy. Just as electric fields store energy in capacitors, magnetic fields store energy in inductors. Energy exists in space itself, not only in physical objects. This concept connects circuit theory with electromagnetic field theory in a very profound way. Now here we have an RL circuit which combines a resistor and an inductor in a single loop. These two components have very different effects on current. The resistor continuously removes energy from the circuit by converting it into heat. The inductor, on the other hand, temporarily stores energy in its magnetic field. So the competition between these effects determines how the circuit behaves. And when the current flows, the resistor limits the final current value. The inductor controls how quickly that current can change, and together they shape the time-dependent response of the circuit. Neither component can be ignored in real systems, so their interaction governs delays, surges, and transient effects. RL circuits are important, of course, because they represent real electrical conditions. All wires have some resistance and some inductance. Studying idealized RL circuits help us predict real-world behavior. Engineers rely on these ideas to to design safe and reliable systems. Physicists also use them to understand how energy flows through currents in time. Now, when the switch in an RL circuit is first closed, the current does not immediately reach its maximum value. Instead, it starts at zero and increases gradually. At the beginning, the inductor produces a strong opposing EMF. So this induced EMF is significantly reduces the net voltage that is driving the current, and as a result, the initial rate of current increases, uh, or the initial rate of current increase is small. And as time passes, the current continues to grow, and the rate of change of current decreases, causing the induced EMF to be weakened. And with less opposition from the inductor, the current rises more easily, and eventually the induced EMF becomes negligible. And at this point, um, the circuit behaves like a simple resistor connected to a battery. And the speed of this process is controlled by the time constant. We have here this equation. T equals L over R. So a larger inductance increases the time constant, slowing the current rise, and a larger resistance decreases the time constant, speeding up the response. So this gradual current growth is extremely useful in practical applications. It prevents sudden current spikes that could damage components. Now, when the battery is removed from an RL circuit, the current does not instantly drop to zero. The inductor resists this sudden change in current, and as the magnet field collapses, it induces an EMF that keeps the current flowing. For a short time, the inductor acts as the energy source. This behavior surprises many students at first. The energy that sustains the current comes from the magnetic field, and as this energy is released, it is dissipated as heat in the resistor. The current gradually decreases rather than stopping abruptly. The resistor ensures that the energy is eventually lost. This smooth decay protects the circuit from sudden voltage spikes. Just like current growth, current decay is governed by the time constant. As I've said, the formula earlier. The same factors control how fast the current fails or falls. Larger inductance means a slower decay. Larger resistance means a faster decay. So this predictable change, or this um, predictable behavior is essential in circuits that require controlled shutdowns. Now, an LC circuit contains an inductor and a capacitor but no resistor. Initially, the capacitor is fully charged. At this moment, all the energy in the circuit is stored in the electric field of the capacitor. No current flows because there is no complete path for charge motion. The system is at rest but full of stored energy. This state can be compared to a stretched spring held in place. Energy exists, but nothing is moving yet. The system is ready to release energy once the circuit is completed. There are no energy losses because no resistor is present. This makes the system ideal for studying pure energy exchange. So the absence of resistance is crucial here. Without resistance, energy is not dissipated as heat, and instead it remains within the system. This allows us to observe oscillatory behavior clearly. The LC circuit provides a perfect model for understanding electrical oscillations. Okay. So when the circuit is closed, the capacitor begins to discharge to the inductor. Charges starts to move, or they start moving, and current begins to flow. As the current increases, the magnetic field around the inductor grows stronger. Energy is gradually transferred from the electric field to the magnetic field. This transfer happens smoothly and continuously. During this stage, the capacitor voltage decreases, and at the same time, the current in the circuit increases. So the inductor resists change. Once again, this prevents abrupt motion. Energy is conserved and simply changes form. Nothing is lost from the system. So this process is similar to mechanical motion. It resembles a pendulum, converting gravitational potential energy into kinetic energy. So the electrical system follows the same mathematical patterns. Such analogies help us visualize what is happening in the circuit. So they show the deep connection between different areas of physics. Eventually, the capacitor becomes completely discharged. At this instant, the electric field energy is zero. So the current, however, is at a maximum value. So all the energy is now stored in the magnetic field of the inductor. The system is not at rest despite the capacitor having no charge. The process does not stop here because the inductor resists changes in current. So the current continues to flow even though the capacitor is empty. So this continued flow begins to recharge the capacitor. However, the charge now builds up with opposite polarity. So the direction of the field, or the electric field, now reverses. So energy continues to shift forms without loss. Magnetic energy is converted back into electric energy. So this constant exchange drives the oscillation. The system naturally evolves without any external force. So this is the essence of electrical oscillation. Okay. So now, as the capacitor charges with opposite polarity, the current begins to decrease. So the growing electric field resists further charge motion. Eventually, the current drops to zero, and at that moment, the capacitor is fully charged again. All the energy is stored in the electric field. So this state mirrors the initial condition but with reverse polarity this time. So the system is once again momentarily at rest. However, the process is not finished. The capacitor will now begin discharging in the opposite direction. So the cycle repeats itself continuously, and in an ideal circuit with no resistance, this oscillation would continue forever. Energy would endlessly shift between electric and magnetic forms. So this illustrates perfect energy conservation. Although ideal, this model provides a deep insight into real oscillating systems. Okay, in this slide, by applying Kirchhoff's loop rule to an LC circuit, we can derive equations that describe its behavior. So these equations take the same form as those for mechanical oscillations. The solution are sinusoidal functions of time. So charge and current vary smoothly and periodically. So this mathematical result confirms the oscillatory nature of the system. The frequency of oscillation depends on the inductance and capacitance. So larger inductance shows or slows the oscillation. Larger capacitance also lowers the frequency. So these relationships allow engineers to design circuits with precise frequencies. So this is very essential in communication and signal processing. And the most remarkable feature is that no external driving force is needed. Once started, the circuit oscillates on its own. So energy simply moves back and forth within the system. So this principle underlies radios, transmitters, and electronic clocks. So electrical oscillations are a foundation of modern technology. Okay, so to better understand oscillations, we often compare electrical circuits to mechanical systems. In these analogies, the inductor behaves like mass. It resists changes in motion, just as mass resists acceleration. The capacitor acts like a spring, storing potential energy. So the resistor plays the role of friction. So these comparisons are powerful learning tools. They allow us to use intuitions from mechanics to understand circuits. Concepts like inertia, damping, and oscillation appear in both systems. So the same equations describe both electrical and mechanical motion. So this reveals a deep unity in physics. So such analogies are not merely educational tricks. Engineers actively use them in design and analysis. So understanding one system helps us understand another. So this cross-disciplinary insight is one of the strengths of physics. It shows how universal physical laws truly are. Now, when resistance is added to an LC circuit, the behavior changes significantly. So energy is no longer perfectly conserved. Each oscillation loses some energy as heat is some energy as heat in the resistor. So as a result, the oscillations gradually decrease in amplitude. So this process is called damping. So the presence of resistance makes the circuit more realistic. So no real system is perfectly lossless. So the resistance is unavoidable in wires and components. Studying the LRC circuits help us understand how real oscillators behave. It bridges the gap between ideal theory and practical application or reality. So the amount of damping depends on the resistance. Small resistance leads to slow energy loss. Large resistance causes oscillations to die out quickly. Engineers carefully control resistance to achieve desired behavior. So this balance is critical in electronic design. Okay, so now in a damped LRC circuit, energy continues to transfer between capacitor and the inductor. However, each cycle contains less energy than the one before. The resistor steadily remove energy as heat, and as a result, the oscillations gradually fade away. Eventually, all motion stops. So this behavior is known as damped harmonic motion. So it appears throughout nature and technology. Vibrating strings, car suppressions, and electronic filters all exhibit damping. Resistance, while often undesirable, provides stability. Without damping, systems could oscillate uncontrollably. Okay, so I believe this is our last slide. As we conclude this chapter, remember that inductance reflects nature's resistance to change. Currents have inertia and they store energy in fields. Electrical systems are dynamic, not instantaneous. From smooth current transitions to oscillating energy exchange, inductance governs timing and stability. Understanding it allows us to see electricity as a living, evolving process rather than just a simple flow of charge.